Serra, Part 9. It's important to remember that the mind of Padre Serra was not simply limited to these 9 missions along the California coast. His mind was much broader and his perspective is much broader. One of the things he mentioned in that special memorandum that had to deal with the relationship of the Indians to the friars and to who had authority over them, part of that memorandum was a very interesting element, that Padre Serra saw the need to open a back door to California. A back door to California, yes. You see, because the only one way they had at that time, or 2 ways I should say, was either traveling from Mexico along the western coast up onto San Diego, or somehow taking a mule train up through Baja California. Otherwise it was unapproachable because of the terrain, etc. But if they take a back door, this may sound strange, but through New Mexico, and they would make their way through some of the mountain areas, and then the river areas of the Colorado River, they would be able to reach the area we call today California much easier. And another issue that's really behind all of this is that the need for Spanish settlers. Now, it may be sort of surprising to you that New Mexico at this time had already experienced, since the 1500s, colonization. And actually in New Mexico, the number of Spaniards to natives was 4-1. So there were an awful lot of Spanish people living in New Mexico that in Padre Serra's mind would allow a further development of the whole area of the missions. He wasn't trying to develop it just for the Franciscans and for a little group of the natives that were there, but he saw the missions and the development of the missions into pueblos, and pueblos as part of the colonial government, as a development into the future. And he knew that he had to open the door somehow to allow those who were Spaniards to also be part of the mix. Now there was a priest already early on by the name of Francisco Garces who actually had the same idea. And he and a soldier by the name of De Anza already had made a journey from Tubac, Arizona, up and through the San Jacinto Mountains to the area of San Gabriel, one of the more interior missions of the Franciscans at that time. So they actually accomplished this. And so there was knowledge that this was a possible route. So De Anza, a soldier, but also very, you might say, sensitive soldier to the question of natives, and Serra met for an expedition with Spanish families as colonists to establish San Francisco. Why San Francisco? As I said, it was originally a part of their knowledge of the area, but not well colonized. And so they thought they would target San Francisco. So they start to make the journey, and they get through in 1776. San Francisco is established not as officially a mission, but as a first secular pueblo in California, with these families that were coming through the San Jacinto Mountains to San Gabriel. Now, there was, however, some, you might say, tension with regard to this new route that was being used, because there was an area under the Yuma Indians and a chieftain, a very gifted chieftain. He was called by the Spaniards Salvador Palma, interestingly enough, because he was so tall, like a palm tree. They called him by this nickname, Salvador Palma. he was very friendly, but they knew how to treat him. They realized Serra and Anza and Garces, the Franciscan friar that was originally part of this adventure, that you had to bring gifts, and that was a very important element, exchange of gifts, which is part and parcel of many parts of the tribal world. But what happens is an interesting tension develops. There is a new setup that takes place in the New World. And that new setup is a new kind of vice, lower commander over New Mexico and California and Sonora. Sonora is the nearest state or section of Mexico to our border. Nogales of Arizona is in the state of Sonora, but at that time it was just like a region of Sonora. So Sonora, New Mexico, and California all become part under the jurisdiction of one man. And he's a little different. And in a sense, he's not Bucareli. So poor Padre Serra has to deal with him and also with a new military commander for California by the name of Neve. Now, Neve is a quiet man, but he's influenced by the Enlightenment and the teaching of Rousseau. And he feels that the natives should be considered noble savages. In a sense, they should be treated not as adult children, and they should not be separated from one another. But Neve feels that they should take over immediately their missions in pueblos, electing a mayor. They call in Spanish it's the alcalde, and then also electing regidores, which we call them aldermen or councilmen, and they would run their own municipalities. And this was going to be the law of the land for California, New Mexico, and other places. Serra was very upset. He felt that this was not going to work. He felt, as the Franciscans felt, that there had to be a future development. It wasn't a matter that they wanted to keep control over all these areas for the rest of their lives, but it was very important for them to deal with this situation. So as time would go on, Padre Serra simply says to himself in prayer, he finally comes up with the acceptance of this whole new project. And interestingly enough, the whole new project falls apart with a number of missteps done by this new commander of the area, the military commander, Neve, so much so that it sort of sets back the whole plan and actually closes the door on the back door to California. So it really sets back, in a sense, the whole establishment of the colonial power over California by the missteps of the colonial authorities, not listening really to Padre Serra and to actually some of the other Franciscans that were in vice to the royal government.